In this video, we'll prepare a cash and GPP lineup for the main slate for FanDuel for Week 13, and it's coming up next. Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Lee.
And I'm Michael Wiley, and we're the Fantasy Football Consultants.
Michael, we are already up to lucky Week 13 in the NFL DFS. And normally we only might have one game where the over-under exceeds 50 points. This week we have three. That's Jacksonville at Detroit, Kansas City at Cincinnati, and the LA Chargers at Las Vegas. So we're going to try to the extent possible to get a lot of those players in our cash lineup. Michael, where would you like to start?
Yeah, well, in addition to having those juicy matchups in terms of points, we've got some really juicy matchups for running back, which we'd love to start with in FanDuel because of half PPR. In terms of great running backs going up against really bad defenses and guys who've been performing lately. And it starts with Nick Chubb going up against the Houston Texans, a 7-point favorite. Cleveland is, Nick Chubb every week that he's been going up against a team that he should beat, gets not only nice production in terms of yards, but really nice production in terms of fantasy points. He's getting in the end zone pretty much week in and week out. He doesn't get involved as much in the passing game as some of these other guys, but he's more consistently getting those huge yards and touchdowns. And so, going up against a really bad Houston Texans, worst in the league rush defense, I think that let's spend the money to get Nick Chubb in the lineup. I know he's the most expensive back, but really not much more than some of the other top guys. Got to get him in there.
Yeah, I like it at $9,600. It does mean, like you say, we got to save some money elsewhere. And I'll start with the other running back at $2,600 cheaper, but he's still going to be a key guy in his team's rushing attack. That is David Montgomery. Michael, there's not a whole lot of threats anymore for his involvement on this team. Khalil Herbert is still out on IR. Justin Fields, I don't think is going to play, but if he does play, I think that he's going to want to protect that front shoulder. So his throwing shoulder is the one that, the non-throwing shoulder is the one that got hurt. That's what he's going to lead to when he runs. So I think he's going to run less. So that gives up more opportunity for David Montgomery. And Darnell Mooney, their star wide receiver, is also out. So all this in a great game environment. He is facing the Green Bay Packers, who are second worst in all the NFL in rushing. So, Michael, we've got the two backs, one going against the worst rush defense and the other the second worst.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, if you watched the Green Bay Packers game this last Sunday night, you saw them get torn apart by the Philadelphia Eagles rush attack. And I think David Montgomery's got a really nice matchup there. But Eric, we spent a lot of dollars here. You got to save us some money at the wide receiver spot. Where do you want to start?
Okay, so probably my favorite pick of the week is Garrett Wilson at $6,600. Look, folks, for really 4 or 5 weeks on this show, we have told you how great Garrett Wilson is. We see him as a clear number one wide receiver on the New York Jets. The problem has always not been Garrett Wilson. It's been Zach Wilson. And there are two main reasons why this week we think the overall pie for the number one wide receiver, Garrett Wilson, will be larger. First of all, Zach Wilson has been replaced with some white guy, as I say, as in Mike White. Look, Mike White provides a lot more opportunities for this whole offense. They got over 300 yards passing last week, is my memory. And Garrett Wilson was a huge part of that, scoring 2 touchdowns. But the other part of it is, look at his matchup. They are in a dome facing the Minnesota Vikings, who are the last ranked pass defense. Bottom line, Michael, is I think the Jets' passing offense will be good, and it's almost a guarantee that Wilson would be a big part of it.
Yeah, he's by far the number one there. He's really a great athlete. Really like that pick at $6,600. I'm going to try and match it at an even cheaper price with Nico Collins. I'm going to stick with that Texans game. We've already talked about how the Cleveland Browns are favored there, should be playing from ahead, which means Houston's going to be playing from behind. Nico Collins has taken over Brandon Cooks as the number one targeted receiver last 3 weeks for the Houston Texans. You know, I know that the move from Davis Mills to Kyle Allen scared a few folks on the wide receivers, but Nico Collins still getting involved in the passing game. You know, he getting both the targets and receptions. Like to see those yards go up. Like to see him get in the end zone. But the $5,800 price tag, given what we've done at running back and want to do it a couple other spots, is hard to pass up.
Yeah, I like that pick at only $5,800. I'm shocked he is so cheap. All right, around that price range. So we're giving you a bunch of wide receivers who Michael and I have given you who are number one wide receivers. I am not going to say Donovan Peoples-Jones is the number one wide receiver, but not counting last week, he gives what you want, a high floor in cash games, getting at least 4 receptions in 7 straight games. And I have 2 reasons why I expect his floor to be great once again, even better maybe than in the past. One, Deshaun Watson is back. And I think that this entire offense should put up more points, more yards with him at the helm. And secondly, folks, they're facing the Houston Texans. First of all, because we just keep talking about the fact that their defense is just bad. It's terrible. Their pass defense is just about as bad as their rush defense. The stats don't show it because teams get way up on them. And I think facing Deshaun Watson in kind of a revenge game, his first game, Michael, in 700 days, I think he's going to want to have a big game and pour it on. So I think we've cornered the market on Browns this week with Chubb and Peoples-Jones.
Yep. And it's time for us to attack a different game. It's time for us to attack that Raiders-Chargers game. So at the quarterback spot, we're going to go with Justin Herbert, who's starting to finally heat up now that he's got more of his weapons back. And he's starting to use his legs, which I thought was a big part of the Arizona game. He's been using that a few weeks now. And, you know, the Chargers are really likely to be a playoff team. They've got to get a win against the Raiders this week. And if you're going to beat the Raiders, you've got to go toe-to-toe because their offense has been heated up and their defense is atrocious. That's why the over-under on this game is so high. I think, you know, Justin Herbert is a little bit less expensive, some of those other top quarterbacks, but can produce from a floor perspective at a similar clip, can use Eckler out of the backfield. Keenan Allen is back. It looks like Mike Williams is probably going to be out. But I really like Justin Herbert. A lot of people had them in their fantasy lineups as the top quarterback throughout the season. I think you're going to see that from him as we get closer to the end, especially if he continues to use his legs.
Yeah, DeAndre Carter is kind of stepping in for Mike Williams and getting just about the same production. So I really like the Justin Herbert pick. FYI, as a pivot, the other guy that I like in this price range is Joe Burrow. Both guys are a part of one of those 3 games that are really high over under with small spreads of 2 points or less. So we think it's going to be a shootout. He's facing Kansas City. And he's got so many great weapons to throw to. And if you want some exposure to those weapons, you're going to need to go with Joe Burrow because Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, these guys are pretty expensive, Michael.
Exactly. Well, where do you want to go for tight end? I know we got to save some money there if we want to get the flex that we've been looking at.
Yes. And I'm excited to get this guy in our lineup. And that is Cole Kmet at only $5,000. Let's give you guys a quick history lesson. Do you remember in the preseason how we were just raving about how great a season Cole Kmet was going to have? He was going to be the second targeted guy on this team behind Darnell Mooney. And he started off with a huge dud. First 2 games, no catches. I couldn't commit to ever putting this guy in our NFL DFS lineup, But since then, he has become pretty consistent, giving you a solid floor in almost every game since. But there are two reasons why I really like him this week to give us, once again, a strong floor. First of all, Darnell Mooney, that number one targeted wide receiver, is out for the rest of the season. So I think that they're going to have to rely on him even more. And secondly, Justin Fields in the past has been such a hog around the goal line, running the ball all the time. I think either, like I said earlier, Fields is not going to play, or if he plays, the non-throwing shoulder, which leads, is going to cause him to run less, especially around the goal line. And that's where Cole Kmet excels, around the goal line, Michael.
Yeah, and Green Bay has a pretty decent defensive backfield, but it's usually covering the wide receivers. Yeah, like this pick at $5,000, and it allows us to get one of the top guys at the flex spot. And I think we should go. It's always tempting to go with a running back in FanDuel, but I like to go with Devonta Adams. Stick with this Raiders Chargers game, which is going to be high scoring. Two strong offenses, two weaker defenses. The Chargers defense has been susceptible, and everyone knows that Devonta Adams is I think the highest floor on this Raiders team. You might argue right now that it's Josh Jacobs, but he's a little more expensive. And Devonta Adams has a huge floor. Look what he's done. 3 out of the last 4 weeks, and even against Seattle, he didn't get in the end zone, but would have had he got 7 receptions as well. I'm looking for him to get a similar week to what he had against Denver, Indianapolis, or Jacksonville the 3 weeks before against this Chargers team. He is Derek Carr. They've got a nice rapport. They played in Fresno State together. They practiced during the offseason. They've been obviously together all this year. He's Derek Carr's go-to at the end zone. He's Derek Carr's go-to on third down. Devonta Adams going to have a big week this week.
Yeah, and you got to remember that Josh Jacobs is banged up. He was able to play through that with the adrenaline of the game, but it's possible that he either doesn't play or is playing less than 100%. They very well may have to rely even more than they normally do on Devonta Adams. Love this pick at $8,600. The last spot is defense. And the drill here at the Fantasy Football Consultants. Because of the volatility that defenses have, we rarely spend up at defense. But we have 3 suitors that we can potentially afford: the Bengals, the Raiders, or the Bears. And you know what? Between Kansas City, LA Chargers, and Green Bay, I'll sign up to face the Green Bay Packers. So let's go for $3,200. Let's not kid ourselves, folks. This is a punt defense, but this defense is at home and they play the Packers. Now we can only hope that the Packers will show us a little love and we see Jordan Love, because Aaron Rodgers is banged up. Even if Rodgers does play, maybe he'll be a little bit hampered. And Michael, at times, this Green Bay offense has really struggled.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers has had a real down year. He's missed some throws. He's thrown some bad interceptions, more interceptions than he's had in the last several years. So even if he is in there, this is the best of those 3 plays, in my opinion.
All right. So I just want to remind folks to, as always, watch the news. One is the Pittsburgh backfield. You want to make sure that if Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren are both out, what a bargain that Benny Snell becomes, who was the lead back last week at only $4,700. Michael, how about let's take a look at GPP?
Let's do it.
In our GPP lineup, folks, we got a contrarian stack for you. I think most people will be targeting one of those 3 highest scoring games, and I certainly understand that if that's the route that you want to take. But at a reasonable 45.5 over under, the New York Jets and Minnesota game, I think, can definitely be a shootout in a dome. We've got Mike White. We think that he provides an excellent ceiling because he's shown it in previous games, not only this year, last week, but last year. And he's got a great matchup facing the worst Minnesota pass defense. And we're going to throw to his number one target, Garrett Wilson, who's at a very reasonable price, and Corey Davis. You can go Elijah Moore if you like. Davis is $200 less, and I think he's the one that probably gives a little bit more upside. And then we'll run that back with Adam Thielen. Couldn't afford Justin Jefferson, but Thielen is coming off a very nice game last week, and he's kind of a mainstay on this offense. Michael?
Yeah, and we're trying to get Travis Kelce in this lineup, and the way to do that is to go with one of these less expensive stacks. I like the contrarian, role here. If this game is somewhat high scoring, which it could be with Minnesota, being able to score against better defenses and having such a bad defensive backfield, then this could be kind of an easy way to beat out some of the other guys. Where else you got going, Eric?
Yeah, as you alluded to, I'm really spent the money. We both spent the money to have guys that we think are going to have tremendously high ceilings. Nick Chubb, who we already talked about, playing the NFL's worst rush defense, could have a huge game. And then Travis Kelce, compared to all the other tight ends, has by far the highest ceiling in this shootout game against Cincinnati. Any comments about those two guys?
Well, Travis Kelce's on my fantasy lineup. Love him. He's been helping me win out week in and week out. He's by far the top guy. And then Nick Chubb we already talked about. And then Dameon Pierce. I think he's got a lot of upside. He's the bell cow. He's the guy at the goal line. Get him a touchdown or two, even if he doesn't get a lot of yards, and he produces.
Yeah, we've seen him produce before. I'm not comfortable right now getting Dameon Pierce in cash games, given his last 2 weeks, but he always has that potential, and he faces the Cleveland Browns, and not only has a below average rush defense, they've been terrible this year, second worst against running backs. So I like getting Dameon Pierce here. And the final thing is a stack with the Chicago Bears, who are at home. They're dogs, but only 3 points against Green Bay. If David Montgomery has a huge game, and remember, the Green Bay defense is not great against the run, then the Chicago Bears should have a good game against the Packers, whose offense at times has struggled.
Really like this contrarian stack. I think that if that Jets Minnesota game turns out, then this is going to be a producing lineup.
All right, Michael and I have already sat down and broken down the cash slate for DraftKings, and that video is on the screen now. And we'll also put a video about NFL DFS that we think you might enjoy. Until next time, take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.